Hey everybody, it's Ronnie again. Welcome back to the 6th episode in my True Chilling Tales series of videos. The story that I'm going to share with you is one of my favorites. I've been really excited to share it with you. I think it's one of the most intriguing experiences that I've had. But before I jump in and tell you about the experience, I need to start off by telling you about a dream that I had the night before I had the experience. The story takes place in 2001. I was still living at 409 Lopez Avenue, which is the house that I told you about in the last video. And while I lived there at that time, I had some of the most magnificent dreams that I've ever had. I've always been a really vivid dreamer. I still am. But the dreams that I had there, there was something about them. There was something about living in that house or that time in my life where my dreams were like out of this world. And also, I've had a lot of precognitive experiences in my dreams. And sometimes I've had dreams where I see something in the dream and then it actually happens later in real life, just as I dreamt it. And that's actually less common. Most of the time I have the dream experience through symbols. And then later in the waking reality, the symbols reveal themselves, and then it all makes sense. And that is the case with this particular dream, and that's why it's important to this story. So the dream took place in, summer of 2001, which is when the story took place. My friend Sarah at the time, in real life, was doing a play up at the high school, and so in the dream I had gone, up to the high school to see this performance, this play, and I had taken my little brother Tavish with me. And Tavish at the time was a little kid. He was like 7 or 8 years old. And so we went up to the high school to see this play, and of course it was altered to the dream reality. So in the dream reality, the theater was actually an outdoor theater at the high school, and it was this really nice sort of outdoor kind of theater venue, and we were watching this play, and it was nighttime, and everything was fine, and then out of the blue, all of a sudden, the audience was attacked by this pack of werewolves, and it sort of turned into a nightmare, and it became really scary, and the audience was, everybody was screaming and running for their lives and kind of flailing about, and the werewolves were attacking people and killing people and eating people, and it was really scary and it was really intense. And my tactic in the dream was to just lay down and play dead, right? Like they won't hurt you, they won't come after you if they think that you're dead. And so that was my reaction. However, my little brother was overcome with terror, and he was so afraid that he couldn't do that, and I was trying to get him to calm down and trying to tell him in the dream, just lay down and play dead and be calm, and he couldn't because he was too overwhelmed with fear. And so because he was reacting outwardly with fear, the werewolves were attracted to him, and they got him and they killed him and they ate him. And it was really terrible, it was really horrifying, and I remember feeling really bad in the dream because I felt like I was responsible for him, and this happened, and anyway, it was really terrible. So when I woke up from the dream, I had this sense that it wasn't just a dream. I felt like there was a message. I mean, this dream really stayed with me, and it's really unusual for me to have nightmares. I don't have nightmares that often. So I just felt like there was a message in the dream. There was something that I was supposed to get, and I didn't have any clue what it meant or what it was, but I knew that the dream was really important to me at the time. So keep that in mind. So the next day after the dream, I believe it was a Friday. I know it was a weekend. I feel like it was a Friday night, and my friend Mac had told me and invited me earlier in the week to a little soiree at his house. He was having a get-together, having some people over, and So I had been in contact with my friend Jasmine earlier in the week as well, and we had both talked about going and planned on going and kind of had been looking forward to it throughout the week. And then when the day came and it was like the evening was falling upon us, I had this sense of like I shouldn't go. And I remember kind of struggling inside of myself, like I felt like my intuition was telling me to stay home, and in my mind was saying, go, it's Friday night, go have fun, you've been planning on it. And so I remember I called Jasmine on the phone, and she felt the exact same thing that I felt. She was kind of struggling with, she didn't want to go, and she did want to go, and we were both sort of like on the fence about it. And my friend Jasmine, who is had shared the experience with me that I'm going to tell you about. She herself is quite psychic and has had a lot of really interesting experiences with dreaming and psychic energy and spiritual experiences. So keep that in mind as well. Anyway, so we were on the phone and we sort of came to this conclusion, like, I'm going to get in the shower, I'm going to get ready, and I'll call you back and let you know what my decision is. And so I remember having this inner dialogue with myself because I felt like it was my intuition that was telling me not to go. And I was questioning my intuition. I didn't know if it was really my intuition or if it was just me sort of, playing tricks with myself and sort of fooling myself into believing this. So I thought, well, why don't you go and, this is going to be a test. So you go, and if nothing happens, then you'll know that you're just fooling with yourself. But if you go and something does happen, then you'll know that it's your intuition. So I got in the shower, and I got ready, and I called Jasmine back, and I said, I want to go. And she said, okay, so we'll go. So I walked to her house, and she didn't live very far from me. She just lived a few blocks away from me on Orcas Avenue. And she lived right behind Albertsons. And so, and again, I guess it's not really behind Albertsons, it's next to Albertsons. It's, just to the left as you're going up the hill towards the mountains. Anyway, so I got to her house and went in for a few minutes while Jasmine was finishing getting ready, and her cat Sylvester was there. I mean, of course he was there, he lived there. So as Jasmine and I left her house, Sylvester proceeded to follow us. So the thing that you need to know about Sylvester, her cat Sylvester, is that whenever I would come over to Jasmine's house, Sylvester would always run away. He would never let me pet him. He would never even really stay present or be in the room when I was around. He was just kind of like skittish and would go and hide. And I remember Jasmine telling me that he was kind of like that to everybody. And it always kind of bothered me that Sylvester had never warmed up to me, because I was always the kind of person who would go over to somebody's house and I'd be loving on their pet, their cat or their dog, and they would sort of say in surprise, my pet never lets anybody touch them or pet them, and look at, they love you. And so I was kind of used to that, and it really bothered me that Sylvester never warmed up to me. So as we were leaving, he followed us, which was really odd. It was really odd behavior for him. It wasn't typical. And so we went from Jasmine's house on Orcas towards South Laurel. For those of you who are in Port Angeles, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I want to describe this for the people who aren't from that area. So basically, we came out of Jasmine's house, and we turned right, and we walked down her street until we got to South Laurel, which is the street that Mac lives on. And his house is about a 5-block walk uphill. So when we got to the corner of her street and we were rounding the corner, there was a house that kind of had a driveway that went up, and there was, I remember, this sort of like rounded curb area, and there was a stone on the ground there. And I remember walking and just looking down, and at the moment I looked down and saw this stone, I saw in the stone a perfectly natural formation of a face in the stone. And the face seemed to be half human and half animal. And I remember just seeing it and being really just noticing it and like, wow, that's amazing. And so I pointed it out to Jasmine, and she saw it too. She saw the face in the rock, and then we continued walking up the hill. So, like I said, it's about 5 blocks up to Mac's house, and so we actually got about 3 blocks up the hill. And what I want you to know is that there's not a lot of street lamps as you're going up. They're kind of spaced far apart, so there's a lot of kind of like dark patches where the light is sort of up ahead or it's behind you, and so there's a lot of like darkness around. And when we got up to Whidbey, I believe it was Whidbey. I could be wrong. It could have been one more block up, which would have been Vashon, but I'm like 99% certain that it was Whidbey where this experience took place. So we were walking, if we're going up the hill towards Max, we were walking on the left-hand side of the street. And there was a house right on the corner, and the house actually sat away from the street and had this really big yard. And the street lamp wasn't on that corner. And so when we got up there, this whole yard was sort of engulfed in darkness. And I remember that the street, on Whidbey Street, nobody had their porch lights on. It seemed like all the houses were dark. I don't remember any lights being on in anybody's homes, no porch lights, no lights coming from anybody's windows. It was like the street was dark and the yard was dark. And we got up there, and all of a sudden Sylvester, who had been following us the whole time, he all of a sudden darted off into this yard. And so Jasmine was trying to get Sylvester, and she was calling for the cat, and she was kind of going into the yard, but not really because it was dark. And I sort of was kind of standing there waiting, and all of a sudden, from the very near distance, does that make sense? The near distance, we heard this really unusual sort of growl. I mean, I don't even know if I could call it a growl. It was some kind of a sound that was coming from something that was alive. And Port Angeles, where I lived, it's a very woodsy area. There's a lot of like natural areas, neighborhoods right by the forest. So, a lot of people have cougar and bobcat sightings, and it's really common to see, possums and raccoons and things like that. But this sound, it definitely wasn't a cat of any kind. It definitely wasn't a bobcat or anything like that. No, it wasn't a cat, was it? And it wasn't a raccoon. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the kind of weird sound that a raccoon can make when a raccoon growls, but it wasn't a raccoon. It was something very large. It sounded. I remember, when you hear something, you can kind of place if it was a large creature, if it was a small creature. This was definitely a large creature, and it was a sound that neither Jasmine or I had ever heard before. And so we heard the sound, and we were both like, what was that? And it really freaked us out. It was really quite scary, because we were like, and it sounded like, to me, my impression was that it sounded like it was just behind the sort of row of houses across the street. So I don't know if it was coming from the alley or if it was coming from the next block over. But it wasn't right there, but it was close. It was close enough for us to be like, that's too close, and so now we have this cat that's missing, and Jasmine, so our reaction when we heard this noise was to get the hell out of there and go back to Jasmine's house, but we couldn't leave without the cat. And so it got kind of intense, and Jasmine was, calling for the cat, and she was getting afraid, and she was reacting, with fear, and we heard the noise a second time. I believe we heard it twice. And I remember Jasmine looking for this cat, and I was afraid too, but I wasn't reacting outwardly with fear. And I actually went across the street. I had to just sort of take a moment, and I went across the street, and I remember sitting down on the curb. And as I sat down on the curb, I had this epiphany. And the dream from the night before suddenly came to me, and all of the symbols in the dream, or most of the symbols in the dream, revealed themselves. And I realized that I was about to experience the dream, or I was experiencing the dream. So here we are on South Lauridsen Avenue going up the hill to Mac's house. Now Mac lives just about a block away from the high school. So that was the first symbol. I'm going in the direction of the high school. We heard the sound coming from the general direction of the high school. So that's the first symbol. And we were headed to a party. We were headed to a function where there were people. And in the dream, I was at a play. I was going where it was something festive, and it was like there were people. And then we were attacked by these werewolves. And my little brother, who was a child and smaller than me, was reacting with fear. And so I all of a sudden realized that my little brother was symbolic of my friend Jasmine. And my friend Jasmine is, I'm a pretty short guy. I'm like 5'5", and Jasmine's shorter than me. So she's, shorter than myself. And she has a difference in her leg length. So she has one leg that's shorter than the other. And so I just realized that it was symbolic, basically, having my little brother in the dream was symbolic of a person who was more vulnerable and who was reacting with this fear. And so, and then there was the sound of this beast, and that was sort of what I thought of it, because we didn't know what it was, and I remember just thinking it was some kind of a big beast that was nearby. It was unexplainable. We had no idea what it was. It did not sound like anything we had ever heard. And so, and of course, your thoughts come rapidly, so I had the revelation much faster than I am telling you about it. So as I had this sort of realization about the dream, I had a second realization about Jasmine's cat. And I knew inside of me that Jasmine's cat was in tune with what was happening, and that the cat himself was actually psychic, and that he was being a protector for us, and that he actually intentionally ran into this big dark yard because he knew there was something up the hill that he did not want us to encounter. And so he was actually causing us to be stalled. And so I had this realization, and I remember coming back across the street and telling Jasmine. I didn't mention anything about the dream to her at the time, but I remember telling her, Jasmine, you need to calm down, and, your cat he's intelligent, he followed us here. I said the reason why he jumped into the yard is that he doesn't want us to go any further. I said, and I remember telling Jasmine, we both had the feeling not to come. We did. Your cat followed us here. I said, if we turn back around and go back down the hill, he's going to follow us. I said, just trust me. So I got her to calm down, and she calmed down, and we both started heading back down the hill, and it was quite a relief because it had gotten really intense. This whole experience had gotten really intense, and we were walking down the hill, and I was walking on closest to the street, and Jasmine was walking on the side of the curb, and we were walking down together, and I remember suddenly knowing that the cat was behind us. And again, this is going to be hard probably for some of you to believe, but as we are walking and I sensed that the cat was behind me, I started to receive a telepathic understanding from the cat. No words, totally through feeling, but it was sort of this sense of approval, like, good job, like the cat was really happy that we were going back down the hill. And as I started to receive this impression from the cat actually, it's so funny, I'm telling you about this and my cat's watching me. Sylvester was behind us, and I'm receiving this message, and he actually came right from behind, and I saw him out of the corner of my eye. I remember walking, and seeing him sort of appear from behind and walked right next to me. And I remember as he was walking next to me, I I received this overwhelming sense of approval, like, I'm cool with you now. That was kind of the vibe that I got from him. And then he walked with me for a few moments, and then he kind of came right around and got right in front of us. And he was basically right between Jasmine and me. And I remember he walked us all the way home. He led us down the hill home. So on the way up the hill, he was behind us, following, sort of, seeing that we were going to be okay. And as we went back down the hill, he like led us there. And I don't know if this is my memory or if this is my memory playing tricks on me, but I want to say that as he was walking, his tail was up, like he was happy. But I remember feeling like the cat was really happy. And what's really amazing is that from that experience forward, Sylvester was, in fact, cool with me. When I would come to Jasmine's house, he would sit on my lap, he would let me pet him, he would stay present in the room, he would not run and hide, and I knew that it was because Jasmine and I turned back around and went down the hill, because he was acting as a protector, and he didn't want us to go up that hill. So later, years later, my friend Anita, who I used to work with, was over at my place, and we were talking, and Anita used to come over all the time for movie nights and things, and we were talking this one night, and the subject of Bigfoot came up. And for those of you who don't know, the North Olympic Peninsula, where I'm from, where I lived at the time, is a hotbed for Sasquatch sightings and Bigfoot sightings, and so there have been a lot of reports with the North Olympic National Park and just in that general area in the North Olympic Peninsula, a lot of sightings of Bigfoot. So Anita and I were talking about Bigfoot, and she relayed this story to me about an experience that she had had quite a few years before when she was younger at her parents' house. So her parents lived quite a ways out of town in the woods. They had this property, and they were surrounded by the forest. And she said that it was nighttime, and sorry, this is actually fur. I'm petting my cat, and fur is flying, and so I'm trying to catch it. Anyway, where was I? Anita was at her parents' house, and she was outside with her boyfriend, and she was telling me the story, and they heard really nearby in the woods, close to the yard where they were, this sound. And as she was telling me this, and the sound that she described, it took me back to the experience that I had had with Jasmine, and I felt really strongly that she was describing the same sound that we had heard. And she proceeded to tell me that they believed that it was Bigfoot, and they lived out there. They knew what bobcats and raccoons and cougars and all of these sort of animals sound like. And she described again like a big, some kind of living creature that was large, making this really unusual sound. And unfortunately, I don't have the oral memory of what the sound actually sounded like, so I couldn't even attempt to describe to you what it was. I used to have the memory of the sound, but I've lost it over the years. That was 11 years ago. But when Anita told me that she thought it was Bigfoot, a light kind of went on, because I thought, oh my gosh, that could very well have been what Jasmine and I heard. And also, it makes a lot of sense with the dream, because in the dream, we were attacked by werewolves. And what a better symbol for Bigfoot than a werewolf, this kind of, animal-like human creature. And also, I remember at the time as well, seeing the face in the stone. I felt like that was some kind of a manifestation of what was happening, or it was like a symbol or a sign or something, when I saw that face in the rock, and the rock had kind of a animal/human feature to it. So yeah, it was kind of interesting, the whole thing. And was it a beast? Was it Bigfoot? Was it just some animal that Jasmine and I didn't recognize? I don't know. I do know that I'm glad that we didn't stick around to find out what it was. And I'm glad that I learned a really valuable lesson from that, which is to never question my intuition. So if you ever have a strong feeling about something in your gut, in your heart, in your spirit, go with it, because chances are there's a really good reason. So thank you again for looking at my video. I appreciate all of your feedback, and stay tuned for the 7th video in this series. I'll be posting it soon. Until then, take care and be well.